The latent power of the soul. This section of this book by Watchman Nee contains 2 parts. This first part will explain the distinction between the spirit, soul, and the body, as well as reveal the enormous potential vested in the soul of man. That potential is what the enemy seeks to exploit through various means, which he has intensified in these last days. God bless you as you read. And the merchants of the earth weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise any more, merchandise of gold, and silver, and precious stone, and pearls, and cattle, and sheep, and merchandise of horses, and chariots, and slaves, and souls of men. Please note here that in this passage the list of merchandise commences with gold and silver and ends with souls of men. Gold and silver, horses and chariots are all natural commodities which can be bartered. Even slaves can be bartered or traded, yet this is a trading in human bodies. Further, though, is an exchanging of the souls of men as merchandise. So also it is written, the first man Adam became a living soul. The last Adam became a life-giving spirit. Howbeit, that is not first which is spiritual, but that which is natural, then that which is spiritual. And Jehovah God formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Over the past 2 years I have felt strongly the need of giving such a message as will now be given. It is a message both intricate and profound. It will not be easy for the speaker to speak nor for the hearers to understand. For this reason, I did not insert this message into part 3 of The Spiritual Man. Yet I have always felt I should give it, especially after having read various books and magazines and having had contact to a certain extent with the people of this world. I sense how precious is the truth we are privileged to know. In view of the current situation and tendency of the church as well as of the world, we are constrained to share what is given to us. Otherwise, we will be hiding the lamp under a bushel. What I would mention in the message for our consideration today concerns spiritual warfare and its relation to the end of this age. Now, for the sake of those who have not read The Spiritual Man, I will briefly touch on the trilogy of spirit, soul, and body. Trilogy of spirit, soul, and body. And Jehovah God formed man of the dust of the ground. This refers to the human body. And breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. This describes how God gave spirit to man. It was Adam's spirit. So man's body was formed of the dust of the ground, and man's spirit was given to him by God. And man became a living soul. After the breath of life had entered into his nostrils, man became a living soul. The spirit, the soul, and the body are 3 separate entities. May your spirit and soul and body be preserved entire. The spirit is God-given, the soul is a living soul, and the body is God-formed. According to common understanding, the soul is our personality. When the spirit and the body were joined, man became a living soul. The characteristic of the angels is spirit, and that of the lower animals such as beasts is flesh. We humans have both spirit and body, but our characteristic is neither spirit nor body but soul. We have a living soul. Hence the Bible calls man soul. For example, when Jacob went down into Egypt with his family, the scriptures tell us that all the souls of the house of Jacob that came into Egypt were 70. Again, those who had received Peter's word on Pentecost were baptized, and there were added unto them in that day about 3,000 souls. Hence soul stands for our personality, for what makes us as man. What are the various functions of spirit, soul, and body? These have already been explained in part 1 of The Spiritual Man. But I was most happy one day to find on the bookshelf a volume of Andrew Murray's writings in which is to be found an explanation of the spirit, soul, and body in the appended notes that is quite similar to our interpretation. What follows is a quotation from one of the notes. In the history of man's creation we read, "The Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, Thus was his body made, and breathed into his nostrils the breath or spirit of life. Thus his spirit came from God, and man became a living soul. The spirit quickening the body made man a living soul, a living person with the consciousness of himself. The soul was the meeting place, the point of union between body and spirit. Through the body, man, the living soul, stood related to the external world of sense, could influence it, or be influenced by it. Through the spirit he stood related to the spiritual world, and the Spirit of God, whence he had his origin, could be the recipient and the minister of its life and power. Standing thus midway between two worlds, belonging to both, the soul had the power of determining itself, of choosing or refusing the objects by which it was surrounded, and to which it stood related. In the constitution of these three parts of man's nature, the spirit, as linking him with the divine, was the highest. The body, connecting him with the sensible, and animal, the lowest. Intermediate stood the soul, partaker of the nature of the others, the bond that united them and through which they could act on each other. That which makes us conscious of God and relates us to God is the spirit. What is the soul? It causes us to be related to the world. C.I. Scofield, in his reference Bible, explains that the spirit gives God consciousness, the soul self-consciousness, the body world consciousness. Horse and ox are not conscious of God because they have no spirit. They are only conscious of their own beings. The body causes us to sense the world, such as our seeing the things of the world, our feeling hot or cold, and so forth. What is mentioned above refers to the functions of spirit, soul, and body. I will now come to the very important problem here. Many view this matter of spirit, soul, and body as being related only to spiritual life, but we need to realize that it is also relevant to spiritual work and warfare. We tend to compare ourselves as being almost equal to Adam before his fall. We assume that since we are human beings just as Adam was, there is not too much difference between us. We think that what we cannot do, neither could Adam do. But we do not see that there are two things here, that on the one hand, it is true that we cannot do what Adam could not do, yet also that we cannot do what Adam could do. I am afraid we do not realize how capable Adam was. If we study the Bible carefully, we will understand what kind of man Adam actually was before his fall. Adam's authority and physical prowess. And God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, Be fruitful, and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. Have dominion over the earth, says God. Friends, have you ever thought how immense the earth is? Suppose a master asks a servant to manage 2 houses. He makes the appointment on the basis of the latter's ability to take care of them. No one servant is able to handle all the houses located on a given lane, for he cannot do what is beyond his ability. A hard master may demand his servant to do a little more than his duty requires, but never will he demand his servant to undertake anything beyond his ability. Would God, then, ask Adam to do what he was incapable of doing? We can therefore conclude that if Adam was capable of managing the earth, his prowess was most certainly superior to ours today. He had power, ability, and skill. He received all of these abilities freshly from the Creator. Although we may not rate Adam's power as being 1,000,000,000 times over, we can nonetheless safely reckon it to be 1,000,000 times over ours. Else he would not have been able to perform the duty commanded him of God. As for us today, though, if we were required to merely sweep a lane 3 times daily, we would not be able afterwards to straighten our back. How then could we possibly rule the earth? Yet Adam not only ruled the earth, but he also had dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the heavens, and every living thing on the earth. To rule is not just to sit by doing nothing. It requires management, and work. From a seeing of this, we should recognize the superior power which Adam in fact possessed. It far exceeds our present situation. But do you think that this insight is something new? Actually, this is the teaching of the Bible. Before his fall, Adam had such strength that he never felt tired after work. It was only after his fall that God told him, "In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread." Adam's brain power and memory. And out of the ground Jehovah God formed every beast of the field, and every bird of the heavens, and brought them unto the man to see what he would call them. And whatsoever the man called every living creature, that was the name thereof. My friends, is this not marvelous? Suppose you were to take a dictionary and to read all the names of the animals, would you not confess that you could neither recognize nor memorize them all? Yet Adam gave names to all the birds and animals. How intelligent he must have been. Those of us who are not so brilliant would no doubt soon give up the study of zoology once we saw our inability to memorize all the details. But Adam was not one who memorized these zoological names. He was the denominator, for he gave names to all. Hereby do we know how rich and perfect was Adam's rational power. Adam's managerial power. And Jehovah God took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. From looking into how Adam governed the earth, let us now dwell somewhat on the things which God charged him to do. God commanded him to dress the Garden of Eden. This needed to be done systematically. How big was the garden? Genesis 2:10-14 mentions 4 rivers, namely Pishon, Gihon, Hiddekel, and Euphrates. They all flowed from Eden and divided into 4 river regions. Can you imagine now how big the garden was? How strong must Adam be to be charged with dressing a land which was surrounded by 4 rivers? He was not only to dress it but also to keep it, to keep the garden from being invaded by the enemy. Therefore the power which Adam had in that day must have been tremendous. He must have been a man with astounding ability. All his powers were inherent in his living soul. We may look upon Adam's power as supernatural and miraculous. But so far as Adam was concerned, these abilities were not miraculous, but human. Not supernatural, but natural. Did Adam use up all his powers on that day? From what can be seen in our study of Genesis, he had not exhausted his power. For after he was newly created by God, but before he could manifest all his abilities, he fell. What was the bait which the enemy used in enticing Eve? What did the enemy promise her? It was this: "In the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as God, knowing good and evil." Be as God was the enemy's promise. He told Eve that notwithstanding the power which she already possessed, there was still a great chasm between her and God, but that if she ate this fruit she would then have God's authority, wisdom, and power. And on that day Eve was tempted and fell. The power God gave to Adam we are not, by our probing in this fashion, being inordinately curious, we only desire to know what God actually gave to Adam. And God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." The words image and likeness may seem to be alike in meaning and may therefore appear repetitious. But in Hebrew the word image does not point to physical likeness, rather it denotes moral or spiritual similarity. Someone has put it as change into likeness, that is, to be conformed to a likeness. The purpose in God creating man is for man to be transformed according to his image. God wanted Adam to be like him. The devil said, "Ye shall be as God." But God's original intention was that Adam should be transformed to become like him. From this we conclude that before the fall Adam had in him the power to become like God. He possessed a hidden ability which made it possible for him to become like God. He was already like him in outward appearance, but he was ordained by God to become like him morally. I use the word morally to indicate that which is above the material, not what merely points to man's good behavior. Thus are we shown how much loss mankind has suffered through the fall. The magnitude of the damage is probably beyond our imagination. The fall of man. Adam is a soul. His spirit and body are joined in his soul. That astonishing power which we have just mentioned is present in Adam's soul. In other words, the living soul, which is the result of the coming together of the spirit and the body, possesses unthinkable supernatural power. At the fall, though, the power which distinguishes Adam from us is lost. Yet this does not mean there is no longer such power. It only denotes that though this ability is still in man, it is nonetheless frozen or immobilized. According to Genesis 6, after the fall man becomes flesh. The flesh envelops the whole being and subjugates him. Man was originally a living soul. Now, having fallen, he becomes flesh. His soul had been meant to submit to the spirit's control. Now it is subject to the dominion of the flesh. Hence the Lord said, "My spirit shall not strive with man forever, for that he also is flesh." When God here mentioned man, he called him flesh, for in his eyes that was now what he was. Consequently, it is recorded in the Bible that all flesh had corrupted their way upon the earth. And again, upon the flesh of man shall it, the holy anointing oil, representing in type the Holy Spirit, not be poured. And further, by the works of the law shall no flesh be justified in his sight. Why do I dwell at some length on this? In Revelation 18 things are mentioned which shall come to pass in the last days. I indicated at the very beginning how man's soul will become a commodity in Babylon, that which can be sold and bought. But why is man's soul treated as a commodity? Because Satan and his puppet the Antichrist wish to use the human soul as an instrument for their activity at the end of this age. When Adam fell in the Garden of Eden, his power was immobilized. He had not lost this power altogether, only it was now buried within him. He had become flesh, and his flesh now enclosed tightly this marvelous power within it. Generation has succeeded generation, with the result that this primordial ability of Adam has become a latent force in his descendants. It has turned to become a kind of hidden power. It is not lost to man, it is simply bound up by the flesh. Today in each and every person who lives on earth lies this Adamic power, though it is confined in him and is not able to freely express itself. Yet such power is in every man's soul, just as it was in Adam's soul at the beginning. Since today's soul is under siege by the flesh, this power is likewise confined by the flesh. The work of the devil nowadays is to stir up man's soul and to release this latent power within it as a deception for spiritual power. The reason for my mentioning these things is to warn ourselves of the special relationship between man's soul and Satan in the last days. We have already seen how Adam possessed special supernatural ability, though in actuality what he had was not at all special or supernatural, however much it may appear that way to us today. Before his fall, Adam could quite naturally exercise this ability with ease, since it was embodied in his soul. But after his fall, this power of his was interned by his body. Formerly the body was a help to Adam's powerful soul. Now the soul had fallen, and his power was circumscribed by the shell of the flesh. Satan, however, attempts to break open this fleshly shell and to release the power dormant in man's soul in order to gain control over man. Many do not understand this strategy, being deceived into accepting it as of God.